Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you here today. If you are new to the show, don't forget to subscribe. And our returning users, if you've been here before but you haven't subscribed, please do. A little bit of housekeeping today. One of the fastest growing podcasts out there. We're in the top 10, and that's because we have great guests and also awesome listeners. So don't forget to comment, to rate us, and to subscribe. We are on all major podcast distribution systems, and then also on the website at rexandrewshow.com. On the website, you can come and see the biographies and information and links to just about every single one of our amazing guests, both previous and future. So stop by and take a look at that. All right. So great guest here today. I'm excited to have her with us. Interesting background. There are a lot of people out there today involved in tech. We have a big following in tech because I'm in tech and got lots of friends. She's a software engineer, a background in software engineering, and does quite a bit of product consulting, and then also early stage technical consulting. And so I'm excited to bring onto the show today, Charlotte Clark. Welcome, Charlotte.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here today. So normally what we like to do in the process is allow people to follow along. So real quick, without getting into the story of current, can you give us a website or how they get in touch with you? So if they're following along, they can follow today, and then we'll do that towards the end of the show.
Yeah, you can follow me on my website, www.customquest.tech. Or if you do social media, Instagram is charlotte.a.clark.
Okay. Can you give us that website one more time, but just a little slower, because sometimes people need to write that down.
It's www.custom, C-U-S-T-O-M, quest, Q-U-E-S-T, .tech.
.tech. Oh, thank you. Fantastic. All right. So Charlotte, what we like to do on the show is get the backstories from people. Most of the time, everybody that is success kind of goes through a pivot or several sets of pivots. So what I'd like to do is take you back to, where'd you grow up, siblings, what did your parents do? The whole sort of what they call the backstory today, up through your education and stuff, and then a little career, and then what you're doing today. So Charlotte, teach us about your background.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have a younger sister. And my parents, my dad owns his own business, and my mom works at a university. And growing up, I guess my parents knew very early on that I was pretty bright. I remember in kindergarten and first grade, I don't know how. I think I had gone through all the homework and all the reading. And my parents then started to advocate for me to get me more reading, get me more math stuff, all that type of information. So really from an early age, I've excelled in math and science, and then up through high school. In high school, I honestly didn't really have a clear path to tech. I was both really interested in math, and then I also was really into languages. So up near college time, I was applying to both liberal arts and engineering heavy schools. And right at my senior year, I decided that I was probably going to shift more towards robotics engineering. That was something that I had done off and on in the past years. And then I just was like, okay, I guess engineering is where I'm going. And then I got accepted to MIT. And so that kind of made it very clear to me that I should be going there.
Fantastic. So you went to MIT. How cool. Did you enjoy Boston?
Yeah. I have family up in Boston, so I'd been there before. But really being able to live and study there is one of my favorite places.
Yeah, Boston's an awesome town. It has such a great vibe. There's 35 universities there. And so it's an energetic, learning, fun community. Now let's dial back just a little bit. And growing up, did you play sports or different activities, or, you know, tell us a little bit about your growing up around your spare time.
Yeah, I did a few sports in middle school. My dad was a college basketball player,
Oh,
so
cool.
there was this huge assumption that I was going to go into basketball, and that didn't quite work out. But in high school, I did crew or the rowing team,
Nice.
and so that was probably one of the better team sports that I was doing right before college.
Oh, love crew. I've got a nephew that did crew at Texas A&M, and he absolutely loved it. So fantastic. So you got out of high school and off to MIT. Now, under MIT, was that your undergraduate, or did you go somewhere before and do graduate work there?
No, I did undergrad at MIT. I started out majoring in both electrical engineering and computer science. And then middle sophomore year, I realized that I was avoiding all the electrical engineering classes. So I shifted my major to computer science.
Okay. Now, at that point in time, I was wondering what types of the particular disciplines were you studying there? Were you working on any AI stuff? Was it mostly programming, hardware? You know, what disciplines were you being exposed to at MIT? Because I know they do a lot of advanced things.
Yeah, I took a lot of the basic classes. So there was one in artificial intelligence, one of them in sort of the nuts and bolts of computers, a couple of them in, learning Python, learning object-oriented programming, that types of things. I did an internship actually abroad in France the summer after my sophomore year. And that internship, I was doing computer vision
Hmm.
work. And that sort of kind of started that, oh, like there's image recognition. And I learned a lot about that and did a little bit of coding in that area. So that's sort of the area I had pivoted to my senior and junior year. I took a few classes in robotics. I took one of them within computer vision. Um, but most of them were very much the like general classes you take to get the degree, not so much the specifics.
So was your degree in computer science then?
Yeah,
Okay, fantastic. So you started working as a as a programmer, software developer,
yeah,
um,
software engineer.
software engineer. Were you coding most of the time? What languages were you working in?
Yeah, so I got a job and they did training for the first 3 months. And within that training, I learned Objective-C, which is an iOS
Yep.
programming language. And then from there, when I got on the team, I was doing iPhone mobile development the first couple of years.
Okay. So how'd you like working in the iPhone mobile development space?
It was really cool. I liked it a lot. It was definitely interesting, not so much because it was mobile development, but just I think the transition from learning in school versus like actually working in a corporate environment
Sure.
was a little bit different than I think I had initially thought of. So that whole process was really interesting and eye-opening.
Now, were you working for Apple at a time? Were you working one of their application development partners? Where were you actually working then?
I was working at Cerner. It's a large
Okay.
healthcare company
Yep.
based in Kansas City, Missouri.
Wow. So that's a jump in Kansas City. So Pittsburgh to Boston to Kansas City.
Yeah.
Did you learn how to eat barbecue?
Yeah, I definitely have taken part in the barbecue scene here in Kansas City.
And please don't tell me you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan. Please, please,
I
please.
I try to I try to stay neutral. I'm from Pittsburgh, so everyone's a huge Steeler fan, and I really wasn't into that too much. And everyone here is a huge Chiefs fan. I'm just kind of like, I'm neutral. I'm neutral.
Okay, good. Because I was going to have to end this interview quickly because I'm tried and true, dyed in the wool Broncos fan. So I
Oh,
grew up in
okay.
Colorado. So that's a
Okay.
nemesis for us. And I've always, as a kid growing up, I always loved the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was the second team. But sorry if you told me it was if you were a Kansas City fan, this interview would be over and we'd be done. So anyway, great. So you went out to work with him in Kansas City. Now, are you still located out in Kansas City then?
Yeah.
Okay. So did you spend most of your time in Objective-C on the iPhone platforms, or have you worked in any other platforms?
Yeah, I was doing mobile development for 2.5 years, and then I had switched over to doing Java development,
Okay,
specifically within microservices and REST APIs.
okay. Yeah, I've done a lot of JavaScript stuff over the years. I love Java. It's just there's so much flexibility that you can do different things. Now, did you ever go to the other side, to the Android side, or did you pretty much just when you were doing the JavaScript?
Um, yeah, so I didn't specifically do any Android development, but right around the time that I was doing microservices and Java work, I was also learning React development and
Yep.
web-based. So that's really where I stayed in that section. And then also, we were testing on both devices as well.
Okay. Now, did you stay with CERN when you was out there, or did you move around a little bit?
I had stayed at Cerner, which was a conflicting life choice. I think that there was a lot of pressure I was getting from people I knew and just tech space that you want to move around every couple of years, different companies. And so I had tried, I had applied at a bunch of different places. And then I was just kind of like, okay, like Cerner's cool. Like, let's just, they have so many different teams. So I was really learning a lot of stuff just from staying at Cerner, but moving in several different team spaces.
Yeah. In tech, a lot of people who may or may not be involved with the industry, it's very frequent to move around. I was in business development, sales, and marketing in tech for my entire career. Now I'm a goofball, oddball. I can actually do a little bit of HTML, not that that's impressive or anything, but as a sales and marketing geek, and geek is a good term. That's not something derogatory. That is a complimentary term. So
Yes.
if I can refer to you as a software geek, then you can refer to me as a marketing geek. So and I'm not calling you a geek, but one of the things I was just curious about that is if you've moved out around a lot, because it is symptomatic of the entire industry. People throw a little more money at you. Maybe it's a different city. Maybe it's a different set of skills. And so it looks like you spent some time there then, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Um, what now? I understand that you are now pivoting a little bit to do some product consulting. Let's talk about that. How'd you get into the product consulting?
Yeah. So I guess 2018, I was in the process of trying to find a new job in New York City. I had interviewed almost at every tech company there, and wasn't getting the job. And I had sort of taken a break. And over the summer, I was visiting a friend, and she was talking about her business. Her and her family were doing juicing, and they sort of just had started without too much of a plan, and they were kind of running into some issues. And so we were talking a little bit about it, and my brain was like, oh, like, have you thought about doing this? And I'd come up with 3 or 4 different ideas. And all of them were things that she hadn't necessarily thought to do, or it hadn't occurred to her. And so she was like, yeah, all these are great. Thank you. And that sort of, for me, created this, I wonder if I could do something with this. So I started to think more about entrepreneurship and starting a business. At the time, I was like, oh, I don't have any experience doing that. I think because I had spent so much time in school and college and then graduating and getting a job, it just didn't occur to me that you could just be an entrepreneur. So I was thinking about, okay, do I want to be a consultant? Do I want to transition careers? And basically spent about a year in 2019 trying to figure out how to do that. A lot of what I was thinking was that I had to relearn skills, retransition my resume, but I thought there was learning behind that. So I spent about a year just learning about consulting and marketing and business development, and then kind of stumbled upon product management. And that for me was really where it started to really click. I was also having a whole crisis. I was like, if I want to be a consultant, does my technical background still matter? And product management really at that point cemented that I could still do business stuff, could still do software things, and have those two kind of meet in the middle.
So did you stay put at Cerner when you started this, or did you make a jump to something else?
Yeah, I was still at Cerner as an engineer, and right around the time that I figured out about product management, I let them know that I was interested in transitioning. Unfortunately, they did not at the time have a clear path to sort of transition out of software engineering into product management. So that timeline kind of looked like 1 to 2 years that they would help me make that transition. So at that time, I knew that I wanted to do something different, but just didn't have the path to it. And then a lot of other companies that have product management expect you to have that experience. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg situation.
Okay. So I've spent a lot of time working with startup companies and helping people being parts of teams that take products and move them forward in the marketplace. Was on a team that actually helped take a company public. And I don't want to name all the names. It just sounds like a vagabond. But one of the challenges I think a lot of times in brand new companies is they frequently will somewhat settle for people who are available rather than the deep expertise that they're looking for. So they might have a cousin or a brother or a friend of a friend or someone that they worked for in the past, and maybe their skill set isn't exactly what they're looking for, but it's sort of enough. And so, or in combination of that, they may not have that much resources to pay somebody what the help that they would look for. Did you start to see that in what you were working on?
Yeah. 2020 is the year that I had decided that I was going to start a business. I was like, I don't really need learning. I'm kind of at a space right now. So
Hmm.
I went through an incubator program and sort of came into that early stage startup space. I initially was going to do custom software, and it had shifted into doing fractional CTO work.
Hmm.
So when I launched last July, that was what I was primarily talking to entrepreneurs and people who had app ideas and start trying to sell them on me being a part-time CTO. And that was the big thing, was that people didn't necessarily want to pay me. They wanted to give me just equity, and then they were expecting me to stay on long term. And I was trying to specialize more in helping them create their MVP and launch. So that was definitely a big thing that I was hitting into and running into, was that they wanted the expertise, couldn't pay me, or that they were like, oh well, we'll find developers just fine, and like that'll work for us. And uh, that's sort of how I started to shift into product, because at that point it was like trying to convince them, not only like do you need someone technical, but you need someone to understand your product and that product focus, because you can't just, I mean, you could totally build a product and launch it, but if it doesn't fit anybody's needs, then you're kind of like, you wasted a lot of time and money doing that.
Yeah, it's a goofy world, and it's probably more prevalent in tech than it is in maybe a brick and mortar type business, just because the skills don't always match. And goodness gracious, I could pay wallpaper my garage with all the stocks that I was given in equity in these companies that just didn't never make it, or only made it for a short term, or those types of stuff. And even the company that I went and helped take public, it was successful at right out of the gate, and then a few years later they took it back private, and then they went back public. And so, boy, I tell you, when somebody tells me they want to give me equity in something, that's like, run, Forrest,
Yeah.
run. I mean, it's not a very good situation, because your time is worth so much, and your expertise, and especially if you've been through a few of these. And a question that I always like to ask a owner, or an executive team is, okay, let's look at your business and pretend that we're sitting here a year in the future. Okay. And a year in the future, looking back to get where you want to be, do you have the people and resources in place today to get there? And most of them stumble through that question because they think they're just going to make that up and get there. Well, people need to be smart and look back and look forward and say, well, if I want to be at this place a year from now, what type of resources do I have to put in place today? Because one of the problems that you run into is it might be better to have someone with more expertise and a little more money today that can get you that place than hire somebody with less skills and experience and sort of lean on that hope that that will evolve. So, a crazy, crazy world on that. So what do you think are the key elements that you are looking for to help? Well, what are the key elements that you recommend and talk to a company about product consulting? Now, what do you tell them are the key things that they need?
Yeah, so I usually start with the idea validation process. I think that's huge. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I had this idea. I know it works for me. Let's build it." And I try to slow them down and tell them to figure out, who their customers are,
Yeah.
and what problem they're solving. Because I think those are two things you're going to continually go back to through the entire process. So really getting them to think about it now, and
Hmm.
especially like talking to people, understanding if they have the same problem that you're experiencing, figuring out if they have an alternative problem. That type of information is trying to really gauge, is this just a you problem? Is everyone else resonating with exactly the problem you're having? And then, how they're solving it currently. I think that a lot of people have ideas for things, and they sound really cool and they sound really clever. I think, especially now, in this day and age, everything goes viral, things get super cool and they blow up. But that's not necessarily, something you kind of bank on. So it's really trying to get down to that core problem, and if people are desperate enough to have a solution, and will your solution be that thing that people are desperate enough to have once it's built?
You're right about that, the validation, because like you said, there's so many things that are being invented out there, and some of them are just gadgets and stupid. And if they don't have widespread problem solving capabilities, they're just gadgets and stupid. I mean, my goodness gracious, I have a friend and she finds stuff every day and she sends me, what about this? What about that? Why don't we push some traffic to this or that? And I'll look at it and I'm like, no, that's dumb because that's only solving a very, very narrow section of a problem for a very narrow section of the marketplace. So it is the validation step is so important because just because you can build something doesn't mean you should.
Exactly.
Okay. So, what other elements do you think is important to coach somebody through on productizing a technology?
Yeah. The second piece is the planning and design.
Okay.
Um, I think a lot of people, especially non-technical, they're like, okay, I want the user to sign in. I want them to do this and do that. And then, that and their problem is solved. And that's great. But the whole thing with software is that, one, usually people do what you don't expect them to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you might be like, yeah, they register, they sign in, but what if they forget their password? Or what if they put in their email wrong? Then what does the software do? And
Right.
starting to sort of plan and design out your whole system around all of that type of unpredictable uh, paths that people can take, and then really trying to optimize that for being the best experience possible. So usually I bring up UI UX design, and UX specifically with user experience, and really getting them to understand that, you want to make sure that it's easy to use. You want to make sure that the person understands exactly what you're trying to get them to do. And then the big software design piece, which is that people, can click things that you don't expect. They can do things that you're like, I would have never thought that anyone would do that. And then you've got to be like, okay, what does the software do to that? Does it break, which you don't want it to break? You want it to error out. You want it to tell them, hey, you can't do that. You've got to do this first, and really start to detail out what is happening. Because I think that's usually where people start to go like, oh, I didn't think about that, or oh, that's a good question. And I think that those two pieces are part of that huge process before you get to development, is because engineers are probably going to have the same questions, but won't be able to pose them in the right phrase and mindset that someone with the product and understanding the business and everything will get to.
I think that's pretty key because in the current day and age, everybody's done this. They've gone into the app stores. Now, I don't go into the evil empire at Apple Store, but I would go into the other one. I'll tell you about that sometime. Anyway, it isn't that Apple has poor technology. It's just that as a company, they're really hard to deal with as a developer. But we've all gone into the App Store and we've downloaded some app. And then you try to use it and it's just a piece of junk and it doesn't work this way and the screens don't flow. Pretty soon you're frustrated. The next thing you know, you're deleting it. And so I call those idea apps, that they had an idea, they published it out. They never did any user interface. They never did any usability. They never tried to break it, and that's one of the biggest problems I see in a lot of applications, whether it's traditional software, SaaS-based type software, or even downloadables or now apps and that technology it's just an idea. And if they don't run it through the rigors of user interface testing, I had this previous business partner, he never wanted to care anything about UI, just nothing about that. And we would put out these applications and they would be so ugly. Now they were functional, great Oracle database behind them, worked amazingly great, but goodness gracious, as ugly as mud. And he always thought that. So in order to have successful software, you got to do it all. And most of the time people don't even think about, I've got to break it before I put it out on Plus. We have a phrase, because I've been in tech for so long, especially about Microsoft early in the days. Microsoft, we used to say, well, the thing about Microsoft is you code it once, test it everywhere. And I think it's a problem a lot of people look at when they look at software. So
yeah, definitely. I think that that's the biggest thing is the assumption that you're like, okay, yeah, like I created it, it works. And you're like, okay, but you've got to think about it, I think, bigger. It's like, okay, how could you break this? Not just like how you think it needs to be used, but how you think that it doesn't need to be used. And I usually call the like ideal situation the happy path. It's like the engineer in me. And then I try to get people to understand that there's like all this other stuff that does not, it's kind of off the beaten path. It's people who get lost in apps and are clicking things and it's just like you either have to have the app curve that person's, fancies of what they think the app should be doing to where you want them to be, or they get lost in your app and then they get confused and frustrated and then they delete it, which is not what you want them to do.
Yeah, well, or even worse than just deleting it, then they go out into the App Store and give people terrible reviews for an app,
Right.
and then that just kills your downloads and you get in trouble. So, app development, there's a gazillion ideas out there, and there's never an end of those. And there always is room in the marketplace for apps, even if there's competitors. But people need to stop and think about, it's not just going to go viral anymore. It's not just going to go out there. And I talk to people on a day-to-day basis because my main business that I run outside of podcasting and interviewing people and learning about their stories is about traffic. And people have these delusions, from podcasters to website people to new apps, that they're just going to build something and the people are going to come. Well, that's just not true. That's just not true. And especially if they find it full of bugs.
Right.
So it's a crazy world out there. So I was going to go ahead and have you give out your website again, and then we'll talk for a couple more minutes about what type of services you're providing.
Yeah, the website again is www.customquest.tech.
Okay, thanks. All right, so going with your custom tech consulting services, what all specifically do you provide as far as a summary of the services that you provide?
Yeah, so I do product design and product management services.
Okay.
So I can help do some of the initial designing. User flowcharts are the main sort of high level view. I can also do low fidelity wireframes because I'm not a designer first, but kind of getting the very general gist of how you want your application to look like. And then more on the software side of things, I can help basically break down your application into functional requirements. So that's usually into user stories, making sure that all the features you want make sense for what a user needs to be doing. So like I said, registration, Do you need to put in their email, their first names, or their phone numbers that are needed? And all that kind of details come through the whole entire application. And then if it's specifically needed, I can help people hire and manage their development team as they work through creating their beta or creating their minimum viable product. Sorry, minimum viable product, aka the MVP.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on today. It's been great insight for you to help, and I'm sure that there are a lot of our tech friends out there going to need some help as far as just sort of looking at things from a product management. I mean, there's a million ideas, but if you don't go through these disciplines, you're going to spend a lot of time, energy, efforts, and headaches. You know, it doesn't say you won't be successful, because there's a lot of people with just persistence. And I always tell people, if you want to talk about persistence, go visit relentless.com. Just, I'm not going to give it away, just relentless.com, and go look and see where that goes. All right, so thanks for coming on today. And I just have one last question. If you've listened to any of my podcasts, it's the loaded question that we've learned a lot about you, where you grew up, school, education, work, all that kind of fun stuff. You know, everybody has this idea of a bucket list out there. Okay, well, things you want to do, neat things, that kind of stuff. Well, there's always an opposite of the universe. So there's a list out there. It rhymes with bucket, starts with the letter F, but I'm not going to say that. What would one thing that would be on your F-it list?
I don't even know.
Well, come on, there's got to be something, maybe something you don't want to eat, a place you don't want to visit, you know, speaking in front of a crowd of 10,000. There's got to be something out that you're going to be like, nope, sorry, Rex, I'm not doing that.
Oh, okay, not doing it ever. Okay.
Yeah, not doing it ever. Right. The bucket list is I want to do it. The F-it list is no way, I'm not going to do it.
There are a couple things. Riding bulls, like the mechanical bull, I will never ever do.
All right, that's the first I've heard that one. Okay,
Yeah,
no bull riding. All right.
And then karaoke is probably the second.
Well, I can't say, well, I haven't ridden any bulls, but I have done karaoke. And one of mine is, I'm not going back to Mexico City. Been there, done that, don't need to go back. So
yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you for coming on. It's been great to talk to you, Charlotte. And we'll call that a wrap for today. So this has been the Rex Andrew Show. Don't forget to stop by the website, and you can always get information about our guests and all the fun things we're doing. That's rexandrewshow.com. And I always have 3 things to say: be safe, be bold, and make it a great day.